Hello and welcome to another episode of the weekly business roundup with me, your host Wadulo, Arnold. And as you can tell, we are in another month of a lockdown. Who saw that coming? Of course, many of us didn't, but hey, it's for the better of our lives. These are the big stories this week. Government imposes a meat ban from all meat coming from Mbarara, Western Uganda. Uganda Debt Network criticizes government on Uganda's debt status. Aviation sector experiments green fuel as a means to reduce carbon emissions. With these and more, stay tuned. It's time for business. A week after the national budget reading for the financial year 2021-2022, Uganda Debt Network came out to criticize government's debt management strategy for the financial year 2021-2022 for not considering strategic and sustainable repayment interventions. Let's take a look. As at December 2020, Uganda's debt to GDP ratio stood at 49% and is projected to hit the 50% threshold by the next financial year starting 1st July 2021. UDN is therefore concerned that Uganda's debt is now growing at a much higher rate than the economic growth.
Anyone, of course, would be concerned about this rapid debt growth against a GDP of $35 billion in 2020, and of course the missed middle income status targets in 2017 at first, and then of course in 2020. The country must deal with key binding constraints, the runaway corruption, execution issues, and also look at new strategies to sustainably manage our debt as a country.
While embezzlement and a lack of holistic accountability for public resources is deterring economic growth, civil society argues that government has in the recent financial year sustained some wasteful public expenditure allocations coupled with high debt repayment proportions against a meager resource envelope.
And you are parting with about 12 trillion shillings. Your own domestic revenues are about 20 trillion. So of 20 trillion, you are removing over 12 trillion for purposes of debt repayment. I think that's not good mathematics, definitely it's ugly.
They assert that government ought to be more aggressive against runaway corruption and time cost overruns in public investment projects if it is to manage the surging debt burden. Take for example the Kampala Northern Bypass project.
This project commenced in 2004, but it continues to undermine grossly Uganda's GDP growth, because we see it is still incomplete since 2004, and yet it should have by this time contributed to the debt expansion and economic opportunities foregone, because we continue to spend on this project even when it was supposed to have been completed some time back.
Uganda's total public debt surged to 65.82 trillion Ugandan shillings as at December 2020, a 35% rise from a year earlier, fueled by fresh borrowing to cover revenue shortfalls as measures taken to combat the coronavirus, which stifled tax collections. Wadulo, Arnold, UBC News. The cost of transacting business in Gulu City has increased as profits decrease among fish sellers due to COVID-19 restrictions on inter-district movement. The Fishmongers General Secretary, Akumu Joyce Achan, says that the cost of transportation has doubled and is likely to put them out of business should these trends persist.
At Gulu Main Market, fish stalls are empty as the COVID-19 restrictions take their toll on the traders. Many sellers have left the main market since the turn-up of customers has also decreased.
We don't have any custom, but when the COVID-19 is not there, we have a very many customers.
No customer enter the market. They fear because our market is very cold and people, there are many, so people they fear to enter because of this what we have like corona.
The cost of transport is another challenge to these traders. Before the presidential directive on cross-border district transport, Akum Joy Achan could spend between 50,000 to 60,000 per trip. It has now doubled.
Then when the corona came, we spent over 100 for transport for our silver fish from there to Buddha.
Nowadays, there's no transport outside. The motorcycle, they bring the fish there, in the river there, up to Gulu. No vehicle.
Gulu district has no major water body, and the majority of the fish is brought from the neighboring districts of Lango, that borders Lake Kyoga and West Nile districts, where River Nile crosses. Gulu main market does not have a cooling plant for preserving fish, and the traders are faced with more losses in preservation. The fish business in Gulu city is dominated by women who have become sole providers in homes. Their husbands have lost jobs. They want government to give them a lorry truck that can transport their products in large quantities.
On the other hand, government this week announced a ban on selling, transporting and consumption of beef from Barara due to the foot and mouth disease that is ravaging the herds of cattle in the western region. Consequently, Kampala abattoirs were also affected, and these are the details.
Beef, goat's meat, mutton and pork eaters in Barara city will wait a little bit longer as government put a ban on meat following the continuous spread of foot and mouth disease within hooved animals. The outbreak of Rift Valley fever lately in the neighboring district of Chiruhura that claimed lives also contributed to the ban on meat and other related animal products.
Alternatively, they are not fake in such a way that there is a number of roadblocks. For example, if the cows are coming from Masaka, by the time they reach here at this area, they have been inspected like 4 times. Then you find that this is the last point where we also have people who have experience in seeing that the documentations are authentic, are not fake.
Some of the meat dealers decry that this has been their only source of income. Now with the closure, they will have to live a difficult life. Local governments have equally been affected due to lack of local revenue that would be generated from animal sales.
We are supposed to collect the local revenue of almost 2.5 billions. But as we talk now, there is nothing we are getting from our markets, from the loading sites, because cattle are not moving.
We have to spread the lorries, any vehicle that enters here. We have to make sure that each and every person who enters here, you have to wash your hands, you have to sanitize, you have to wear the mask, you have to put on the mask. That is a must. Anybody who doesn't adhere to that, you are not allowed to enter in this place.
Some farmers still blame government for failure to vaccinate wild animals in Lake Mburo National Park, where majority think it's the source of this infectious disease.
At times our cattle move there, they are not vaccinated, and they get virus from there to this side.
Government recently launched a vaccination plan, but it's yet to commence in the affected areas within a dry cattle corridor.
KCCA this week evicted traders in Chikubo, a retail zone in downtown Kampala, for all the dangers it posed in regards to spreading the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Chikubo continued to host thousands of customers despite several warnings from the authorities, thereby calling for disclosure.
Chikubo Business Center is the heart of business in the city, with over 10,000 traders visiting the center for both wholesale and retail purchases on a daily basis. Due to the overgrowing numbers of people that throng the center and fearing the spread of COVID-19, this prompted the resident city commissioner for Kampala and head of COVID-19 task force in Kampala, Hudu Hussein, last week to ascertain on how traders conduct business with the breaching the COVID-19 guidelines set by the Minister of Health.
On CCTV camera, we are going to close you, particularly Chikuro. If you don't abide by the rules, we are going to close you.
Earlier today, Kampala Capital City Authority Enforcement Team, led by Kim Lubega and backed by police, cleared the business center of all vendors who operate outside Chikubo shops, along verandas and walkways to create space and reduce the numbers. Many were seen parking their goods and merchandise to leave the business center premises. Though the operation seemed inconveniencing the vendors, they applauded the enforcers for their efforts to save lives.
Sagala abantu batambule nga tebambadde masiki, abantu balina otambula nga bambadde masiki so okubeera nga tuli balamu muganda wange.
Papa muzeeyi bituyisizaawo bimali yaffe yonoonese naye ate batuyamba buyambi munnaaye.
Daniel Nuwe Abine, the spokesperson of KCCA, said they are to continue with operations of such a kind to eliminate the numbers of people from converging. He, however, warned them against occupying the streets of the city and instead find their ways inside markets.
We had an operation in the civic center, especially to deal with congestion in public workspaces or in public spaces where we have had people trading in unauthorized areas, as well as causing human jam in most of these areas. We have been in the Chikubo area, which was packed with people, and this was largely because they were trading within the road, that is Chikubo lane, and also in the various corridors that link or that connect to Chikubo lane. These trading the road and limit the space of movement, and as they limit the space of movement, we find that there is a lot of shoulder rubbing, there is a lot of there are so many packed people in one area, which can easily cause the spread of COVID-19.
Ivan Juko, UBC News.
On the global scene, Lufthansa Cargo Airlines is experimenting green fuel as a means to reduce carbon emissions in the aviation sector. Now, this venture has, however, been recorded to be 3 times more expensive than using ordinary jet fuel, and thus leading the airline's administration to call for mass production in order to bring the costs down.
Flying high above the clouds, this flight to Shanghai is like no other. It's carrying nearly 100 tons of cargo, but unlike other air freighters, which come with a costly environmental price tag, this plane is doing it sustainably. It's an expensive but greener alternative to traditional jet fuel. In this case, it's made from bio-waste, like leftover cooking oil. Aki Martinka has led efforts to bring it to Lufthansa Cargo.
It's really something which has been produced just a few days or a few weeks ago, which has grown as a plant, as a vegetables, taking the CO2 from the atmosphere just a few days ago, and now putting it here on the aircraft, it goes back into the atmosphere.
Unlike other fossil fuel alternatives, sustainable aviation fuel requires no modifications for planes to be able to fly with it. Lufthansa's dedicated Boeing 777 can fill up with regular fuel or a sustainable source if the airport offers it. But there's a reason all the world's airlines aren't rushing to use sustainable fuel. Supply is limited, and the cost can be 3 to 5 times higher.
We need much more producers, because the more production we have, the better will be the price at the end. I guess there will be a competition then, and we would have also a more reasonable price for the sustainable aviation fuel.
Researchers looking for other sources for sustainable aviation. But power to liquid still remains largely a lab experiment. There could eventually.
You grab the CO2, which there is, ideally grab it out of the air, and combine it with hydrogen which you get by electrolyzing water, it certainly could meet all the aviation needs. The crucial factor here will be renewable electricity.
Be enough of it to power all of today's flights. But that is not expected for many, many years. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
The situation is not in our favor. And I read the statistics from Minister of Health this morning. Even our children whom we thought were safe, they are no longer safe. I saw numbers for ages of 10 to 19, already 400 plus. The figures of 1 to 9, they are already at 70. So colleagues, I think we have all the reason to worry if this is a real threat. If I had the powers, I think I would take a very drastic step, but we leave that to our superiors. So,
ever wondered what a beer factory looks like? Tonight in our Sounds of Business, we'll share with you the production of Ngule beer at the UBL factory in Luzira. Enjoy. Don't let the lockdown deter you from pursuing your goals of 2021. Continue to pursue them no matter the cost, as long as you stay within the standard operating procedures. Otherwise, thank you for joining us in this episode of the weekly Business Roundup. My name is Wadulo Arnold, and we're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Hotel. Allow me to give a big shout out to Suits by John Mary, and catch us next time, same place. From the team, we must say good night.
Patriotism is a feeling of love, devotion, and the willingness to sacrifice for one's country.
I say no to corruption because I put my country first. I choose peace over violence because I put my country first.
I love Uganda. I serve Uganda. I sacrifice for Uganda. I'm loyal to Uganda. I love myself.
Be patriotic. Uganda first. This message is brought to you by the National Secretariat for Patriotism Co Uganda, Office of the President.
We've cut